So we're going to now speak about recording results, enhancing, retesting, and refining our design. Until now, we conducted the test, we did a lot of prep, and tried to conceptualize who we should pick, how many users we bring in, how we should conduct the test, what we should tell them, and all of those details. Now we've actually done it. What do we do with those results? What do we do with everything that the user is telling us? We have maybe pages of notes. What do we do with it, right? So I'm going to read this to you. This is from Steve Krug's book, and it is a very nice, insightful articulation of what happens at the end of a test. So let's say you are a team of like 5, again, let's say a team of 5 working on a project, and one of you has conducted the test, and all of you have so many thoughts about the design. Then someone maybe in your team or outside of your team would have conducted the test. And another point that I would like to add over here is that ideally, if you can, have someone else outside of your team test your design. That can make a big difference, because you are too close to the design, and you may not be able to be as objective as you would like to be. It's just natural. So getting someone else outside of your team to test your design is a really good idea. Next thing is, never tell the user that's your design. If you're testing it, don't tell the user that it's your design, because what happens is, if they know you have designed it and you've put in so much effort into it, it's less likely that they would criticize it. They may tell you all the nice things, right? So I have oftentimes, when I'm testing my design, I tell users that this is created by someone else and I'm trying to test it for them, right? Then they can be more objective. So you, as a team of 5 people, are now sitting down, and the other 4 or all 5 of you have been sitting and taking notes. You've been in the other room, you've taken lots of notes of the test and all. Now you sit down and you say, okay, let's make sense of this. Now when do you do that? Typically you would, let's say you test 5 people or 8 people in the day, you schedule somebody every hour or something like that. Always plan and keep time between 2 tests to do the debriefing. This debriefing is the most important. Otherwise you will have lost some of the information, and you will have muddled and connected, had all kinds of cross connections between users if you try to do it at the end of the day. So it's very, very important that you debrief right after the testing that you've done, and do it as a team very quickly. Spend 10 minutes. So if you schedule your participants, schedule them for an hour every hour and a half. So you have that half an hour gap between participants, and then you can do the debriefing then. What kind of debriefing should you do? And that's where this is very nicely done. Let's just read through it, right? Everybody, so this was a product called elance.com. So this was a design called elance.com, and let's read what they have to say, right? Everybody seemed to be drawn immediately to the cool stuff links at the top of the home page, particularly animate your logo free. Okay, so you can quickly discuss and then make a 1-page summary like this at the end of every user. It's good that it engaged them, but after they were finished looking at the offer, they all seemed puzzled about how it related to the site. Okay, they couldn't, it was initially attractive, but then they couldn't connect it to the site. 2 of the 3 users were unable to figure out what ELANS was. Remember our Think Aloud video that we watched, where the user was trying so hard to find out what is this organization, who is this organization, what do they do, and she couldn't figure it out. So similarly, people come to a website with certain expectations and they can't figure it out, and then they go, right? So 2 of the 3 users were unable to figure out what ELANS was without some help. They figured it out eventually, but one of them said he wouldn't have bothered if he wasn't in a test, right? So this is what I was telling you. People will be on much better behavior than they would be in a natural setting, and therefore, you need to be even more cognizant of this and aware of this. The wording of the main message still needs work. Next, everybody was unclear about how to get started. So this is an important point for you to notice, right? And also over here, what we noticed, that they all seemed puzzled about how it related to the site. What is the connection between this and that? Okay. The wording of the main message still needs work. Unable to figure out what ELANS was. Unclear about how to get started. They all found a way, but they were uncertain and anxious along the way. There's still maybe too many entry points. So if they're anxious and uncomfortable along the way and uncertain in a test, in a real situation, what might happen is what happens in today's world. You can just click and move away. It's very easy to now walk out of a store, walk out of a site, right? So things like uncertain and anxious are things that you would need to address. 2 users thought they understood the site, but they were puzzled by the community tab. Is there another name we could use? Okay. The words buy and sell seemed to puzzle them. They weren't sure whether to think of themselves as buyers or sellers. 2 of the 3 users were confused by RFP versus fixed price. The minute you have abbreviations, they can be very dangerous, right? So 2 of the 3 users were confused by RFP versus fixed price. They all liked category listing. Seeing categories they were interested in right away on the home page encouraged them to go on and find out more. So you can see that in the process of writing up this one page, which you would have done in a quick debriefing as a team at the end of it, you have found out so many things that you can improve. So if ELANS were now to revise their design and move on to the next revision, there's so many things that have been identified by the user that you have captured. If you did not do this right after the test, a lot of these small things would have gotten lost. You would have missed them later. Okay, so this is one of the most simplest and most powerful ways of recording your results. So then you have at the end of the day or at the end of the week, you pull all that together and say, okay, now let's see what we need to do about our design. Okay, but don't postpone debriefing till immediately after the test. Okay. Now there are various tools that allow you to do usability testing. This is a screenshot that I'm showing you from Moray, which is one of the tools that is used for usability testing that we used for the corporation transport site. And 2 things that you can see on here. This is showing the entire screen that the user is working on, and in here you have a small window that shows you the user's face and a video feed of their expressions and what they're saying. Okay, so simultaneously you're seeing where they're going on the screen, and at the same time you're seeing their face. So this is what this kind of tool does, and there are of course more sophisticated tools available now, but to do a good usability test you don't always need sophisticated tools. Sometimes paper and pen and your empathy can get you some of the best results. Once you've discovered the problem, what do you do? fix it as quickly as possible. If it's small little things, fix it before the next user comes. And that is where, Post-it notes and these kind of little things that you do on prototypes are very, very helpful. So you can, before the next user comes, you can replace this Post-it note and put another. Okay, you can maybe shuffle around a couple of sheets, but with paper it makes it very, very easy to do this. So fix the problem as quickly as possible. So if you need a change, make it quick. Test early and iterate. Testing one user is 100% better than none, as I told you earlier. Should you test anybody or nobody, test anybody. It's much better to get another human being, look and at least maybe few things you will be able to discover that don't work, right? One user is better, 100% better than none. Testing one user early is better than 50 near the end. So as I was telling you, if you have time and budget to do 9 users, do it not as one test but in 3 tests. Okay, and keep refining your design as you go. Testing must be iterative until reasonable quality. What is reasonable quality? Going back to the example that I shared with you, where we had set 15 minutes as the benchmark. Okay, if you've got it, if the product has to ship and you've gotten pretty close to that, and then you can perhaps take a call and say, okay, let's go forward with it. So that would be reasonable quality. 35 minutes would not be reasonable quality. All right, now let's look at prototyping fidelity. As I told you, paper prototypes are the lowest fidelity, and therefore they are the most flexible, the lowest cost, and all of those things. They can be very, very useful and powerful, as we already know now. So the ideal way to do it is, if you have alternative concept or competitive designs, right? You have these 3 and you do the testing with all the 3 and emerge with the best design, okay? Where you take the different features and collate it into one good concept. Remember the earlier in this section when I showed you the 2 usability testings that were done for that restaurant, that food service kind of application. And they ran 2 designs simultaneously. I also showed you on the remote, 2 sides of the remote were basically 2 alternative designs. So it's important to, especially if you have 2 very closely competing designs. So test them all like this and then evolve your best design and keep doing all that with paper. Okay, while it's very easy to make changes. Once you've kind of frozen in a general approach of a design, then you move to higher levels of fidelity. So then you do a little more refining. Here you've done the core high level of the design. Here perhaps you're going to do some more of the detail level, the further levels of the design, and then you move into wireframes, which would be the next level of fidelity, and then you move into more finished prototypes that look much closer to the real thing. So test with increasing prototyping fidelity. So this is a good overall approach to take for your design. Now here's a quote by Professor from Kellogg School of Management, where he says, don't be afraid of failure. It can be profitable to fail early, fail cheaply, and fail forward. Okay, and this this quote or some version of it is becoming very popular today when people are talking about fail early, fail cheaply, and fail forward. Keep failing as you go forward. So it is, as I told you, as you go forward, you get better and better. Okay, so don't be afraid of failure. And this is an interesting way to put it. It can be profitable to fail early, right? It is profitable because again, you are reducing your risks. So this is an example of a phone-based app that shows how it moved across from paper, and then I'll show you what the final app looked like. So this was a Be a Hero app, which was meant to for people who wanted to donate in times of disaster, right? There's disasters around the world all the time. So at that time, you know, I want to donate to some cause, some disaster. So this application, that is what it was being designed for. So this was their first version, and as you can see, you know, it's very basic, simple. Then they decided to put in a map and some more details. Then they decided that it became important for the person to know which are the agencies they're donating to, and then what are the locations. And then, you know, it evolved like this, from this with testing, from this further testing to this, further testing to this. Okay, so iteratively they kept refining the product, and this is how the real final app looked like. And you know, there's various features. This is the entire thing of the different the different locations in which the different disasters that are happening, the different locations, the different organizations. How do you pay money? How do you donate? It's showing you with the map, etc., etc. So it is a nice way for you to see how a design moved from an initial to this version, which became fairly close to the real thing. If you look at this screen and you look at this screen, you can see how close they are, right? And it has all been derived on paper. Now, the tourist story example that I gave you, and I'm going to show you very quick sort of prototyping that this team did, and got just basic quick feedback, right? Over here they say, liked the map idea and understood the screen. And then when they went to the next thing, could not understand map button, could not understand mute or unmute button. These are little notes, annotations that the team is taking as they're testing with users. Then this screen they couldn't understand at all. It didn't make sense to them and was confused about the navigation. Now, while this is too cryptic, right? It is very cryptic, but at least I wanted to put it forward to you for you to get an idea that after usability testing, how it can at least indicate to you where things are not going well. Now, I would like to present to you this case study of Mobikwik, which was done several years ago, and it's one of the examples that has documented the process that they went through. So they were coming with an online portal for recharge. While it is very commonplace today, the time at which they were looking at it, this team, young team of designers and engineers, the notion of online recharge was very new. Okay, so their thinking at that time was 90% telecom customers are on prepaid. Increasingly people are moving to internet and all that, and many have credit cards and net banking accounts and all that, which was you know, on the uptake at that point. It wasn't that commonplace yet. So why couldn't phone recharge be done online? So this is the challenge they had set for themselves, the challenge that they are posing to themselves, saying, why couldn't phone recharge be done online? So if you remember, they are asking the question, why not? Okay, provoking question. So then they embarked on this, create more services around recharge to make it more convenient for people. So let's say we do recharge online, and what else can we do with it? Design a simplistic and easy online experience. Okay, this is what they set out to do. Simplistic and online, those are very nice words, but what does it mean? How do you clarify what that means. You know, everybody thinks they're creating simplistic products. Who thinks they're not? Everybody thinks they're designing easy experiences, right? So this is how they defined it. Using Mobikwik should be easier than walking across the market to get a recharge card. When you walk across the market, the time, the effort, the energy, whatever it is takes, this is how easy it needs to be. So they defined easy, and then this also became their benchmark, right? How easy does it need to be? And they went through this process of refining their design progressively. So this was one of their early designs, right? When they felt that this was the most important thing. This is based on their understanding, their research. Before they started usability testing, they felt that winning free talk time was the most important thing, that would be the most important thing to people. And so they gave it a lot more prominence. Then they came to realize that special offers, you know, was more important for people to know. Okay, so then that moved, and win free talk time was given lower priority. One of the other things that they also realized before, that they have now implemented in this prototype, earlier they were not putting an amount over here, right? Then they realized that a fixed amount, most people recharge for a fixed amount. So if you already put that amount over there, you're making the job a little easier for the user. That is what our goal needs to be. How can we make it easier and easier and easier? So then in their successive prototypes, they put a preset amount, and you know, it came as a default. Then after that, they felt that this information, how many people have signed up. Remember, it was a totally new service at that time. So it was very important for them to be able to convey how many users have signed up, right? And so this acquired even more prominence, right, up there. And then recharge with an SMS or phone. This also came in with the use, and everything that is being changed or introduced is an outcome of usability testing. So once they were fairly comfortable with what the design needs to be, then they went into a more higher fidelity design. You can see before this they were working with very bare bones design. Then they looked at different versions of how the visual appearance of this should be, right? So then the visual appearance came in. This was one version, this was another, this was another, and then this was how they presented the user an opportunity to compare different services. And then this was their work of how should error messages be. Error messages are one of the most nasty things that you know, a user encounters, and one of the things that makes a big difference in their ability to overcome that hurdle and carry on with their task if there's a clear error message. So they actually spent a lot of time in designing their error message. So that is what the Mobikwik example was about, and the progression of how through usability testing and iterations they improve the design. Now I want to show you another example of e-cycle, you know, the electronic waste recycling. Now this is one of the earliest prototypes that they had created. In red they have marked what the user said. Here the user said, I would like to know what you would do with the e-waste, right? So that was not up front. Now where's the sign up? I want to sign up, right? Early on they, you know, they were still working out a lot of these details. So then in the sign up, when they actually went in for sign up, there was this BESCOM meter number, right? So the user is asking, what is this? Where can I find it? Where will I find this number? How will I know what my number is, right? And every question that is being asked, remember, every single question is an opportunity for design, opportunity for refinement. So here what is the user saying? This is selecting a date for, you know, when the user needed to schedule a date for a pickup, is when they were, what they were initially thinking. Oh, I have to select from some specific dates, but I thought I can call you any time based on my convenience. This is what the user said. So guess what? What does that mean? That's something that we have as an expectation from the user. So we need to attend to it. So, this was the first version of the product, and the first initial visualization of what it needed to be. Now, they went into the next level of detail, right? And they started to put in more details and get more information. This says too much text. Okay, the users were struggling to read everything, or they didn't like it. I don't remember the details. They recognize these names. Okay, this caught their attention. Now over here it says select article, and then there's a number, and he says, what if I want to add more? Okay, this was not clear to the user. Now when this was added, the user says, this is what I was looking for, right? Now, when we say, let me select my mode of shipping, once I've decided how many things of what I have and picked the number and selected everything, let me select my mode of shipping. I'm done. This looks fine, but what is this mode of shipping? The user is asking, what mode of shipping, right? What does that mean? So what is the team saying here? Mode of shipping should be called something else. Otherwise, it sounds like I'm buying something. But what you're doing is giving away your e-waste, right? Now here was another one where it says I choose one of these. I request shipping for agency, or I will go myself to the agency. So the user is saying, why should I go and drop off my stuff? Okay, so right away all of these things being taken into account become opportunities to keep making the service better and better. Coupon section wasn't very clear how and what to do. So, they were trying to think of whether this service could have some kind of marketing with some of these brands, right? So, if the coupon section isn't clear. It says approved. Once we have approved of your articles, we will send you a mail to your registered email address, right? And the user is saying what? Approved means what? I am donating something. Why do I need an approval? Very valid, very legit, right? Why do I need an approval? So, this is, from a later report that said mode of shipping was very confusing. I just want to get rid of the waste. Help me do that. So, what did they do? They did away with allowing the user to select collection agencies, and eCycle can act as one central collection agency. So, instead of the user picking which collection agency they would get. And this is how the service was envisioned, and these were like posters and public service messages that they also, this team designed, explaining why it's important to cycle, about the lead and the mercury, throwing away metals like copper, gold, silver leads to needless mining for new metals. So they took it upon themselves to detail out the based on the underlying motivations and underlying playing on people's sensibilities and their sense of responsibility about recycling. So they carefully crafted all these messages and planned them as public service messages. So if you remember the design strategy statement that said we are designing a dash that does dash for dash. So this was their initial statement. We're designing a web portal through which consumers manage exchange of e-waste, regards with responsible collection agencies. And then they revised it for, we will evolve a design which is not standalone but a service that could be narrated through multiple platforms. Okay? And this is the system diagram of the service that they designed that I showed you earlier, which shows very clearly where what the customer does and where the request goes. So the front end over here and the back end. Customer does this, this happens. Customer does this, this happens. Customer does this, this happens. Right? So there's constantly a connection and a feedback showing you exactly how this works. So I'm going to quickly run through the final design. of this service that was created. And based on all these feedback and multiple iterations and revisions that the team went through in order to create this. So the most important message was given up front. Give us your old and unused electronic products and get up to 30% on your monthly BESCOM bill. Okay? And then, why e-cycle, explain that some more. Why should you give, and explaining that with some graphics and things that would grab people's attention. And then, showing how it works, and then the amount of discount that people might get. And then if they wanted to schedule pick up, explaining when and select a date, right? That they will contact them, and then explaining to them the BESCOM meter number. Where do you get that from your electricity bill? Pointing it out to them, right? This is in your electricity bill at this point, this corner, take this number, right? And this is how the revenue model was designed, and these are messages that were designed for the public buses in Bangalore, right? So that this could be put on the buses. And so this was a nice, interesting way that started with the notion of e-cycling and then developed into a complete service through the process that we followed of the iterative, the paper prototyping and the iterative usability testing to keep refining the design. And finally the design ended up with very different from what it started out to be, but very powerful, very compelling design. Here's another example of the design that I showed you, that was the clothes shopping for the Indian context to buy, gift and donate clothes. So these were some of their early prototypes, lots of work on paper. This is one of their early prototyping with a user. This is the moderator and this is the user, and there's testing in process, and then they moved on to more higher fidelity. Once they were more comfortable with it, you can see the higher fidelity prototyping, user testing, usability testing going on over here, and this is what the screens that the users were seeing. If you remember this example of the Mozilla Firefox browser that was tested, that was redesigned, and then how the performance improved with time, and how the support calls, the questions and the answers, the need for questions and answers and all dropped significantly. If you remember that example, I want to just show you with that what was the design that went through. This was the original design, right? This is how it looked. You can see it's a very busy design, and this is what people needed to rummage through. So this is the landing page before the redesign. This is one of the first version of the paper prototype, right? So this was the first version, and you can see how it's much more white space, much cleaner, seems much easier and not as overwhelming as this one. And then this was one of the next revisions, later iteration for the home page with some more details on each of these. And then this was an early HTML design after they were somewhat comfortable with the design, an early design. And then this is how the support page finally launched, right, as it launched after the redesign. So it gives you an idea of the progression that the design went through. So to summarize this whole section about usability testing, first part is the preparation, right? Prepare your test plan, prepare your test protocol. What will you say or do with the user? If you don't ever go into a usability testing with your empty hands. You may as well not do it, right? Take from the usage scenarios you derived earlier. Remember what you derived as the scenarios, and then pre-test with a colleague or friend. Find someone, because there will be bugs in your testing as well. How smoothly the message flows, whether your tasks have been described right, whether your prototype kind of flows together. So this is the prep work that you need to do. And then to test your design, test your prototype with people you're designing for, the people for whom it's intended. Put it in their hands and ask them what they make of it. Ask them what does it mean to them. Get their feedback, integrate the feedback and iterate. Do that again and again and again. And once you've quickly built another prototype, you'll do it all over again until it is just right.